to the computer. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our course, which is titled Controlling Your Anger. Surely a lot of us can sign up for a course just based on that title alone, Controlling Your Anger. We know that anger is seen as a vice in Judaism. It's not a value, it's not a virtue. There may be times where technically a person might wish to display anger, but even there, our sages urge us to do so with the greatest of caution. And indeed, as I mentioned last week, Moshe Rabino, Moses, is punished with not coming into the land of Israel because of his anger, which is really interesting. Anger seems to be the stumbling block for the greatest of all of the prophets. So don't be too hard on yourself if occasionally you find that you may get a little hot under the collar. Even Moses did, and there was no one greater than him. We looked last week at the power and the terrifying power of what anger does. Famously, we saw a passage in the Talmud that says that if you are wise, anger causes you to lose your wisdom. If you are a prophet, anger causes you to lose your prophecy. Very, very interesting. It seems that anger at its root is something which in the moment we stop thinking straight. A person loses their rational faculties. And anyone that's been in the what we call the red hot zone of anger knows that sometimes the worst things can come out of a person's mouth. Certainly things which we then later regret and wish we could take back after the moment. And we finished last week's class. This is all a review. We finished last week's class with a fascinating statement of the Talmud that says, working off of a verse in the Torah, there shall be no foreign gods among you. This is on first glance, a prohibition against idolatry. We know idolatry is the Torah's greatest sin. What God really doesn't like is idol worship, worshipping other gods. And in one verse in the Torah, there is a line that says, there shall be no foreign gods among you. So far, so good, very straightforward. However, the Talmud takes this verse and does something incredibly creative with it. When the Torah says there shall be no foreign gods among you, it reads it in a hyper-literal sense. And that among you, it reads, there should be no foreign gods within you. Literally within your very body, within your very person, there should be no foreign gods within you. And the Talmud says, this refers to anybody that gets angry. Because when you get angry, it's as if you've forgotten that God is in the world. You think you're the center of the universe. You think you're the only person that matters and your way is the only way. And in such a moment, it's akin as if you've made yourself into an idol. It's as if you've made yourself into a god. There's no room for God anymore. Let's say I'm late for the bus and I get extremely angry because I'm late for the bus and I miss the bus and I'm furious. Well, okay, you missed the bus, but you're not the center of the universe. And circumstances maybe outside of your control were at play, and perhaps God has an aspect of your life here. Perhaps God has a role to play in your life, in whichever circumstance. I'm giving a benign, silly example, missing the bus. But when we get angry, it's as if we forget there's a God, and it's as if we're putting ourselves in the center of the universe. We're making a God out of ourselves. Says the Talmud, there should be no God among you. Read it, there should be no God within you. There should be no foreign God within you. This is somebody who gets angry. Very, very interesting approach to anger. So this is a summary of last week's class. And what I'd like to do with you today is I'd like to look at a variety of different approaches to what it means and how great a virtue it is to be patient, to hold one's anger in check, and not to lose one's patience. Because fascinating, the corollary of getting angry is the great praise the sages spoke of for those that could control their anger. And that's what I would like to look at with you today. Some examples of just how praiseworthy it is to practice the trait of patience, to practice the trait of controlling one's anger. So take a look with me, please, at the most incredible passage in the Talmud. This is a passage taken from the Babylonian Talmud, Shabbat, page 30b and 31a. It speaks about the great Rabbi Hillel. Have you heard of Hillel? Hillel, one of the great sages from the Talmudic period, really one of the greatest of the greats. He comes from Babylon originally, moves to the land of Israel. He will live approximately the year 100 BCE, and Hillel is the leader of the generation, the leading rabbi in the land of Israel after having moved from Babylon over to Israel. Take a look at the following. Now, Hillel, one more word of introduction. Hillel had a learning partner whom he occasionally disagreed with. His name was Shammai. And Hillel and Shammai were the two great leading rabbis of that generation, and they were known for their difference in temperament. This is really amazing. Hillel was patient. Shammai, not so much. Hillel was patient. Shammai, not so much. And this is where we begin our story. This is where we begin our story. Just one moment, please. Somebody is messaging me that they would like to come in to our class. So I apologize. Just give me 1 second. Just before we start, let me just send this individual the link. And away we go. Okay, we are ready. And sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Let me get us back. Okay. Let's continue. Can you take a picture of your handout? Actually, let me see if I can send you the handout. Lynn is asking a good question. Give me a moment, Lynn. Zoom itself sometimes allows for a handout to be sent. 315-288. 315-288. Let's see if this works. Thank you for your patience, everybody. And we'll see if this works. Did anything come up on the chat? Let's try that again. And we'll see if this is cooperating. If not, we will continue with our class and I will send it to you after the class. No, it doesn't look like that's working. Sorry, Lynn. We will send it out after the class. Okay, so back to our class. And we take a look at the Talmud. You can see my page. Okay. The Talmud states as follows. A person should always be patient like Hillel and not impatient like Shammai. What an amazing beginning for a passage. Always be patient like Hillel and not impatient like Shammai. So the first thing you learn from here is that Shammai was a little impatient. Okay? Happens to the best of us. This was a rabbi. This was a leading rabbi. And yet, the Talmud is telling us you should be more like Hillel. I'm going to read it in the English. Take a look at the following. This is fascinating. There was once an incident involving two people who made a bet with each other and said, anyone who will go and aggravate Hillel to the point that he reprimands him, to the point that Hillel will lose his temper, that person will win 400 zuz of a bet. Now, that's a lot of money. That's an awful lot of money, 400 zuz. So two people talking to one another, and they say, who's going to go and drive Hillel crazy? Who's going to really annoy him? And one of them said, I will aggravate him. Is a very Jewish passage of the Talmud. Nobody has a problem stepping up saying, I'll be a nudnik. I'll happily go and aggravate the rabbi. Okay, so look what happens. Look, how would you imagine you would go and drive crazy the rabbi? So that day that he chose to bother Hillel was Shabbat Eve, so Friday afternoon. I don't know what it looks like in your house on a Friday afternoon, but in my house, it's usually craziness running around getting ready for Shabbat on a Friday afternoon. Barbara, you have a question? I see your hand is up. No? Just the hand went up. Okay, no problem. So I lowered it for you. All good. All good. So it's Friday afternoon and Hillel was washing his hair. Where's Hillel? He's in the shower. He's in the shower. He's got his shampoo, maybe conditioner. He's washing his hair. He went, and this is the person who's waging the bets now. He went and passed the entrance to Hillel's house in a demeaning manner. And he started shouting out, who here is Hillel? Who here is Hillel? Now, by the way, if you're going to be referring to Hillel, you don't call him on a first name basis. Now, in today's world and society, we're a lot more casual with each other, and that's fine. In the period of the Talmud, people made sure that they spoke either in the third person or with incredible courtesy and deep respect. You would have referred to him as Rabbi, Rabbi Hillel, Rabbeinu, the Master, any one of those titles. You certainly wouldn't have said, shouting around outside of his front door, who's Hillel? Who's Hillel? However, this is what this gentleman did. Hillel wrapped himself up and went out to greet him. Now, I want you to imagine the scene. I want to bring this to life a little bit. You're knocking on the door, and there opens the door. There stands somebody in a full dressing gown with one of those towels wrapped around his head. Okay? You can picture the scene? You know, sometimes ladies like to come out of the bathroom after a shower with a towel wrapped around their hair. Everything is perfect. It's all prim. It's proper. It's neat. It's tidy. Hillel's in the middle of his shower. Okay, he comes out. He's got one of those Hilton hotel. Well, he probably didn't steal it from the Hilton hotel, but he's got one of those hotel garbs on. And he says to him, my son, what do you seek? Okay, very patient, very welcoming. He said to him, this is the person that's made the bet, I have a question to ask. Hillel said back to him, ask, my son, ask. The man asked him, why are the heads of Babylonians so round? Now, you need a little bit of background. First of all, it's a silly question. You need to know it's a silly question. This is not a halachic question. This is not, I dropped the milchik spoon in the fleishik pot. Is my chicken soup still kosher? That's not this type of question. This is not, I've got Shabbos candles. Do I light them? I don't have enough oil. It's not a halachic question. It's a silly question. It's a silly question. But the second thing you need to know is that it was somewhat of a dig at Hillel. Because where did Hillel come from? Who remembers? I told you in the introduction, he came from Babylonia. Hillel was a Babylonian. He was a Bavli, as we say. He was a Bavli. He was a Babylonian. So veiled in this rude question is not only a waste of time, silly question, Erev Shabbat, as he's in the shower, but it's also a dig at Hillel. My gosh, you've got a round-shaped head. Could you imagine? Okay. Hillel said back to him, hang on, before you look, I don't know, you probably saw. What would you say? What would you say? Be honest. Right now, you're in the shower, it's Shabbos, in 20 minutes, you're doing your hair, and this silly person's knocked at the door, driving you crazy with the question, why is your head so round? What would you say? Now, you're polite, you're lovely people, you get out of here. What are you wasting my time for? I can't believe this. Is this what you've come to wait? Like, you can imagine the scene, right? You'd probably scream, chase them down the street. I mean, not if you're in your robe. Hillel said to him, my son, you've asked the significant question. It's almost humorous, right? This give and take, you can almost hear it being a comedy skit. Very good question. The reason is because they do not have clever midwives, and so they don't know how to shape the child's head at birth. Wow. I think there's a lot written on it. As you can imagine, there's a lot written on this passage in the Talmud. I think Hillel is answering him honestly, answering him correctly, and taking him seriously. Why are Babylonians' heads so round? Because their midwives are not skilled. And when the babe is born, they are not skilled at somehow or other reshaping the child's head. In modern science, I'm sure you're familiar with this, when there is a blockage at birth, it could actually be an extremely dangerous moment for the mother. And there are modern techniques which, for want of a better phrase, I'm sorry, I don't know the technical name of the apparatus, there is a type of suction that can help with connecting onto the baby's head and then helping to birth the baby. It's a small suction apparatus. You may know, if you've been so blessed to have a baby, you may know that babies' skulls are extremely soft. The bone in a skull is not fully developed at birth, and the skull is very soft. For those cases where the suctioning apparatus is used, it can result in there being a conical cone shape, not exaggerated, but you can, as a result, have this almost cone-shaped resulting to the head. That is then gently, and I don't know how, the midwife, the doctor, the nurse, I don't know, is then somehow or other reshaped, pushed back down, gently allowed to return back to its natural condition, etc. And in the ancient world, it was no different. In the ancient, they might not have had a modern suction technique, but they would have had an ancient suction technique. So why are Babylonians' heads round? Great question. Midwives are not skilled. They don't know how to reshape the child's head at birth. The man went and waited 1 hour. A short while later, he returned. Okay, now we're really close to Shabbos. Okay, if before Hillel was in the shower, now he's setting the table. He's like, they're at the final stages. They're about to light candles. Where is Hillel? Who here is Hillel? Who here is Hillel? Again, Hillel wrapped himself and went out to greet him. Hillel said to him, "My son, what do you seek?" The man said to him, "I have a question to ask." He said to him, "Ask, my son, my pleasure, no problem. Whatever I can do to help you." Now again, this is the second time he's bothering him. Could you imagine if after the first time around it was already a silly question? "I've got a question." "No problem. Tell me, ask." The man asked, "Why are the eyes of the residents of Tadmor bleary?" Again, a foolish type of question. Hillel said to him, "My son, you've asked a significant question. The reason is because they live among the sands, and the sands get into their eyes." Fascinating. Okay. Silly question is asked. He answers him properly, appropriately, cordially, and with patience. Once again, the man went, waited an hour, and returned. Could you imagine? Now Hillel's about to start Shabbos. It's actually about to be Shabbos right now. Knock at the door. Who's Hillel? Where's Hillel? Who is it? Again, Hillel wrapped himself and went out to greet him. He said, "My son, what do you seek?" He said to him, "I have a question to ask." He said, "Ask, my son, ask, my son." And the man asked, "Why do Africans have wide feet?" Again, foolishness, silliness. You've asked a significant question. The reason is because they live in marshlands, and their feet widened to enable them to walk through the swampy areas. Fascinating, almost the sense of evolutionary biology over here. They live in marshlands, their feet widened in order to better enable them to walk through swampy areas. 3 interruptions, and this is all before Shabbat. Let me ask you a question. Are you getting angry just reading this passage? Are you getting a little anxious and frustrated just hearing about this nudnik continually banging on his door? Let's keep going. The man said to him, "I have many more questions to ask, but I'm afraid you might get angry." Hillel wrapped himself and sat before him and said to him, "Ask all of the questions you have to ask. Ask them, please." And now look what happens next. It was the man who wagered the bet. That man got angry. Look at how beautifully ironic this is. Who's the one that gets angry? The one that wagered the bet to see if he could anger Hillel. That man got angry and said to him, "Are you Hillel, whom they call the Nasi of Israel?" Nasi is the technical term for the leader of the generation. In modern Ivrit, in modern Hebrew, the Nasi means president. But in the time when the Sanhedrin stood, the Nasi was the head of the Sanhedrin, the head of the Supreme Court. So this is the senior most leading rabbi on the entire Supreme Court of Israel. "Are you the Hillel whom they call the Nasi of Israel?" He said to him, "Yes." So the man said back to him, "Well, if it's indeed you, then may there not be many like you in Israel." He curses him. "I hope no one ever is like you." Now that's a harsh, horrible thing to say to somebody. And Hillel said to him, "My son, for what reason do you say this?" The man said to him, "Because I just lost $400 because of you." And Hillel responded back to him. This is such a beautiful finale. Hillel said to him, you should be very careful, and you should definitely avoid such situations, because Hillel is worthy of having you lose $400 and another $400 upon his account. And Hillel will never get upset. Amazing. So that final conclusion of the passage is that Hillel gives him instruction, as if to say, well, you better be very careful whom you're trying to wager in a bet to lose their temper, because somebody like myself, it's worth you to have lost $400. In fact, it's worth you to have lost $800, because better that you should lose your money than I should get upset. It will be a disaster for me if I was to get upset. Incredible. Incredible. Now, let's pause here for a moment, because the point of this class is titled Controlling One's Anger. And I really believe that it's through the Torah study that we learn together, that we can learn examples, but more importantly, that we can try to inculcate into our personalities these very traits that we're learning about. So let me make this real for a moment. Let me try to bring this down to our everyday lives. This isn't just a passage of the Talmud written 2,000 years ago. It's you and me right now. It's January 2023. What will you do the next time someone's driving you crazy? And ladies and gentlemen, it might happen sooner than you think. Here's what I'm going to do. And I share this just personally, and maybe you might be able to gain something from my own personal experience. The next time someone's driving me crazy, by the way, I have some small people that run around in my house. They're like this high. They're called children. I don't know if you've ever met these types of creatures. They really can drive you crazy. I have one of them is 5 years old. 5 years old. She can ask questions that would make this man in our story look wise and smart. So this person, whenever I will be asked the question, whenever I will be, perhaps driven a bit mad, I think I'm going to think of this very story itself and be able to somehow or other remind myself of this and say, Hillel was able to be patient, even though someone was asking him silly questions. I'm going to try and practice this same trait and practice this same quality of patience. And I share with you that if you remember this story, and it's a very powerful story, if you can remember this story, then I believe that in the moment, it's going to help you tremendously. In the moment, it's going to help you tremendously. Any other suggestions from you, what it might look like for you to try and inculcate this story or this message into your own personal lives in terms of how you may be able to control your anger? Any ideas? If anyone would like to shout them out. Yes, Lynn, I've unmuted. Oh, hang on, did I? Yes, there you go. Yes, Lynn, please.
Yes, my idea first is I would transform the notion of control.
Okay, expand.
And bridge it with an enlightened response. So if you were to say to me, when something comes to me that is irritating me,
yes,
I would look at it as a messenger come to teach me something.
excellent.
And that would be what diffuses the initial irritation. It neutralizes rather than controls it, and it takes me to a higher spiritual plane,
Excellent.
to just an idea.
I love that. And actually, I don't know if you are aware of this or not, but there is even a Talmudic passage. It doesn't exactly say what you say, but there is a story told that one of the great rabbis of the Talmud had a student who just didn't understand his lesson. And it said that it took him 400 times of explaining it for the student to finally understand the lesson. And he would do this again and again and again. And he would teach him 400 times. And one day, the student didn't understand it even after the 400th time. And the teacher asked him, why did you not understand? And he said, I was so worried that I wouldn't understand the class after 400 times of you explaining it to me, that even on this occasion, after 400 times, my fear and worry of not understanding it actually made me not understand it, even after the regular amount of time it takes me to understand it. And the teacher said, if that's the case, don't worry, I'll explain it another 400 times. And there is this sense of just being able to see people as there's a message that the people in front of us have for us, an opportunity for us to grow from. It's a very powerful way of reframing the experiences we have. Do you know when I'm very bad at this? I'm very bad. I'll speak very honestly now. I'm very bad at this when I'm in a hurry and I'm in the supermarket, and whichever line I choose, it's the slowest moving line possible. That is such a struggle for me. You have no idea. Classically, what happens is the very person who's just in front of me, after finally getting to that point and they're ready to pay, they will then take out their wallet and pay with every single last coin they have in their wallet. And they will count the shekels one by one by one by one. And I tell myself, the reason this is happening to me is because God knows I have no patience, and God knows I need to work on my patience. And where better to work on my patience than in this scenario, being in the supermarket when I'm actually late already. It's an excellent way of reframing. There's a message for me here. There's an opportunity for me to learn. There's an opportunity for me to grow. Excellent. Excellent. Yes, Gina, please.
Yeah, so it may not respond to the question directly, but I mean, a couple of things are coming up. One is like the distinction between feeling angry and losing control over your anger and using it in a destructive way. So when I think of Hillel's response, it's hard to know if he was angry, what was bubbling up. His last response, like the last thing that he said was I can't remember the exact word, but like, be careful about, who.
Yeah.
So there's this whole piece around, because as a therapist, psychologist, and I work with people who are constantly pushing their anger away, and I don't want to get into that too much, but I think there can be value in feeling it, because that's a message. Something is just not okay. Like setting an appropriate boundary and then channeling that anger in a constructive fashion, right? So that's where, I knew prior to taking the class that stuff was going to come up for me, because spiritually, of course, we want to be patient and calm and loving, but there are life situations where getting in touch with our anger is important so that we know what to do. So that's where I think it could get tricky.
So it's really interesting. I want to respond with two responses. I think you're right when you suggest that you should be aware of your anger, feel it bubbling up within inside you, and yet channel it appropriately. I think when you don't channel it appropriately, you scream, you shout, you lose your temper, stop bothering me, leave me alone, whatever the case may be. I think that it's really important to be aware and self-aware of the anger you feel it bubbling up. It's a great metaphor, bubbling up. However, the second thing I want to respond is I think from that story of the Talmudic passage, although we're never given an insight into Hillel's inner psychology, I have always interpreted that story that he never even got to the stage where he felt his anger bubbling up inside of him. I read that Talmudic passage where he had such control over his own emotional state that inconveniences were not something that even angered him. And he had worked upon himself to the point where he was able to be in an equanimity with a balance, a perfect sense of balance, of calm, of no matter what you might do to try to frustrate me, I'm actually at even keel, and I'm not even letting myself get triggered by your behavior. Now, that clearly is an amazing achievement, because I think anger comes so intuitively, almost in a reactive sense to so many of us. And yet, I think that Hillel was able to achieve this state of inner calm and equanimity. So it's
when there is,
yeah.
sorry, but when there is injustice, as there are many in our world, generations, as we know, particularly our own people, without that fire, right? Without that,
Yes.
and I know that's an extreme example, but you can have it in situations of abuse or where that fire is an
Yes.
indicator. Constructive, effective, skillful action can be taken. Although your point is extremely well taken. I mean, to aspire to that is wonderful, but for me, it still begs the question: what happens when something really needs to be done? That's where anger can be. It can be constructive to feel it at least. Right?
I think having a sense of powerful emotional response to something which is an injustice is critical to being a functioning human being. To see an injustice, to see something terrible, and to feel upset by it, to feel disgusted by it, to feel disappointed by it, to feel that you need to respond to it, I think that is critical. However, if we can tease these parts apart a little further, I think they're actually two separate emotional responses. One is, this is inappropriate, this is not right, this is poor behavior, and this needs to be stopped, and we need to do something about it, on the one hand. And I'm still able to maintain a cool head under pressure that would ordinarily be a cause for me, as a result of seeing this injustice, that would be a cause for me to lose my rationality and to lose my patience.
Within Judaism, last question, within Judaism, if we feel that sense of indignation, anger, frustration, and we're not at the level of Hillel, does that make us less spiritually evolved, so to speak, less godly?
So I'm going to give you a surprising answer. I think to act on that indignation and frustration can actually be a mitzvah. It can be a great virtue. And what pops into my mind, and I'm sure some of you are thinking the same scenario, is we've just started the book of Shemot. Last week, we opened up the book of Shemot. We're introduced to the character of Moshe Rabino. Who is Moses? Well, he's a baby placed in a basket in the reeds. That's how he starts life. But what are the vignettes that we get of his early life? He's throwing himself into fights. The first time we meet Moshe as a man is he's gone outside and started a fight with the Egyptian who's beating up the Jew. This is the first introduction to Moshe. Quick to anger, fast to get involved. What's the second vignette we see of Moshe? The very next day, two Jews are fighting. Again, throws himself into the middle of the fight. Hey, stop fighting, stop this. What's going on? You can't do this. Starts shouting. The third story of Moshe, he gets right into a third fight, this time with the daughters of Yitro and the Midianite shepherds. So Moshe is a perfect example of somebody who sees the injustices of this world, can't sit by quietly and just be passive, and throws himself into the action. There are times where it is correct and appropriate to respond with indignation. Okay, let's go further. Let's go further.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
A famous passage from the Talmud. I've shared this with you already, but let's read it again. It happened that a certain non-Jew came before Shammai and said to him, "Convert me on condition that you teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one foot." We're familiar with this passage of the Talmud. This gives rise to the famous expression, "on one foot." It's an expression that means, give me the 10-second version, as we would say nowadays. Don't give me the whole long spiel, just give me the elevator pitch. That's what we would call this. Teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one foot. Shammai pushed him away with the builder's measuring stick. Amazing. Talk about our introduction to the previous passage that said, be patient like Hillel, don't be impatient like Shammai. Shammai chases after him with a stick in his hand and starts pushing him away. The same convert went to Hillel, who converted him. Hillel said to him, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor." That's the whole Torah. While the rest is commentary, go and learn. Amazing. But the passage finishes with this incredible conclusion. Some time later, 3 converts met up. They said, Shammai's strictness sought to banish us from the world, but Hillel's gentleness brought us under the wings of the divine presence. Amazing. Amazing. With a sense of patience, even if a person's being a little bit facetious, teach me the whole Torah in 10 seconds. What do you mean, teach you the whole Torah in 10 seconds? No, but Hillel took him seriously. And later on, the person was able to say, Hillel's gentleness brought us under the wings of the divine presence. Rabbi Simcha Zissel of Kelm was an early 20th century sage. He wrote a book called Chochmah u'Musar, and he comments in a one-liner on this Talmudic passage. He said, it would be ideal if we could become accustomed to the attribute of patience. For patience is the source of all good character traits and inner calm, and is the root of all virtue. Wow. Let me read that again. That's a very powerful thing to say. It would be ideal if we could become accustomed to the attribute of patience. For patience is the source of all good character traits and inner calm, and is the root of all virtue. That is amazing. That is absolutely amazing. To be able to say that, that's not a small thing. Oh, okay. There, I just put in the chat bar this week's source sheet. I hope that you can access that. It's via a Dropbox file. You might need to have Dropbox installed already on your computer. Not making this easy for some of you, I see. But if you do have Dropbox, or you've heard of that, or you know what it is, hopefully you'll be able to access that file, okay? If you're still struggling and you'd like a copy of this, just drop me an email at the end of the class and I'll send you the text as an attachment. But by the way, if you can print this out, that would be worthy of putting on your fridge. It would be ideal if we could become accustomed to the attribute of patience, for patience is the source of all good character traits and inner calm, and is the root of all virtue. I have to tell you, there's something extremely powerful for me that I find when I'm around people who are calm. There is something so almost spiritual, I would describe it, when I'm around somebody that has a sense of inner calm. I'm sure you've sensed this in your own lives as well. When you meet those people, when you talk to those people, they speak a little softer, they speak a little quieter, and you just feel what? You feel calmer yourself through the mere interaction. There seems to be a mirroring soul to soul. And when you speak to someone and you look in their eyes, your soul is impacted by their soul. And I've left those conversations, I've left those experiences a little calmer as a result. Perhaps you've experienced that. Maybe this is resonating, perhaps not. It's incredibly powerful. Let's go on a little. We come to a passage now from the Talmud, Tractate Yoma 23a, with a commentary of a medieval rabbi called the Ritva. The Ritva, approximately 14th century Spain. Let's take a look at the passage in the Talmud, and let's take a look at the Ritva's commentary. This is an incredible, incredible testament to the virtue of those who don't respond to insults and remain calm. I want to read this in the Hebrew because it's worthy of hearing the Hebrew, because it's a play on words. Listen to the following. Hane'alvin ve'enan olvin. Those who are insulted but do not return an insult. I'll read it again. Hane'alvin ve'enan olvin. Those who are insulted but don't respond in kind by insulting back. Shom'in herpatan ve'enan mashivin. They hear how people will disparage them, but they don't respond back. Alehen hakatuv omer. Upon such people, regarding them, the verse states, V'ohavav katzeit hashemesh b'gvurato. Those people are like the powerfully rising sun. They love him being God. They love God like the powerfully rising sun. Isn't that a beautiful metaphor? When you are insulted and you don't respond in kind, when you are suffering insults, but you don't return the insult, when you hear of your disparagement, but you don't reply, you are like the sun as it's shining in its full force. Isn't that incredible? I want you to look in the mirror the next time this happens and look at yourself and tell yourself, you're like the sunshine. You are like the sunshine, strong, powerful, warm, get a source of warmth to all. Amazing. Look at the commentary of the Ritva. This is a Talmudic commentator that speaks about this passage. Regarding this verse, those who love him will be like the powerfully rising sun. That's the verse he's talking about. Regarding this verse, it can be explained with another verse. This is a very Jewish way to explain something. He takes a verse from Daniel. The wise will shine like the radiance of the heavens. What a beautiful line. The wise will shine like the radiance of the heavens. Look at what he says. The person who wisely does not respond with anger when insulted shows great humility and extraordinary inner strength. This person is above everything around him and unaffected, just like the sun is above everything on earth. Therefore, such a person is compared to the greatest and highest object we know, which is the powerfully rising sun. That is a beautiful interpretation. Let's see that Talmudic passage again. Number 4, Yoma, Tractate Yoma 23a. Those who suffer insult but do not return the insult. Those who hear their disgrace but do not reply. Regarding them, the verse states, they are like the powerfully rising sun. The sun is higher than everything. It's unaffected. The sun is unaffected by anything. Therefore, the person's reward is compared to the sun because the sun is higher than everything else. Friends, when we're learning these passages, I'm not just showing you something so it could be a curiosity, so that it could be something interesting. I'm sharing this with you so that you yourselves can contemplate these passages, think about them, inculcate them into your life, and the next time something may trigger you to actually draw strength from these very passages themselves. Let's take a look at Kohelet. This is an amazing, amazing verse. Divrei hachamim benachat nishma'im, meza'akat Moshe bechsilim. The words of the wise, spoken in a gentle manner, are more readily accepted than the shout of a ruler among fools. Let me read that again. The words of the wise, spoken in a gentle manner, are more readily accepted than the shout of a ruler among fools. Let me ask you, has anyone really listened to you when you were shouting at them? If you've ever shouted at somebody else, have they taken your words? Have they turned around like, oh, now that you say it like that, I'm actually going to listen to you? No one listens to somebody when they're shouting. It's almost like we have an off switch in our brains. We don't listen anymore. You know when we listen to somebody else? When words are said gently to us. And so beautifully, Kohelet says, the words of the wise are spoken in a gentle manner. You want someone to listen to you. You want to get your point across. Gently speak it, almost quietly. It's an amazing passage. We'll finish with a story. This is a story of a rabbi called Rabbi Chaim Ozer Grudzinski. Rabbi Chaim Ozer Grudzinski was an incredible rabbi. He was the rabbi of Vilna, Lithuania, at the end of the 1900s. At the end of the 1800s. The end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s. The son of a rabbi came to Rabbi Chaim Ozer Grudzinski, the rabbi of Vilna, and tried to persuade him to influence a certain community to accept his father as their rabbi. Rabbi Chaim Ozer did not consider the person worthy for such a prominent position and politely refused. The son began to speak harshly and insolently and kept insisting that Rabbi Chaim Ozer comply with his request, but he remained silent and he did not reply. When the person's words were becoming too extreme, Rav Chaim Ozer and another scholar who was visiting him walked out of the room. The other scholar commented, "Rabbi, there is a limit to patience and tolerance. Why didn't you say something to this young man?" Rabbi Chaim Ozer calmly replied, "He is trying to help his father. While my sense of responsibility for that community does not allow me to agree to his request, I still have no right to complain about this person and his words. After all, He was motivated by a desire to help his father. Could you imagine someone screaming at you? Could you imagine someone being rude to you? Could you imagine someone really laying into you for no justified reason whatsoever? And yet you were able to see the good in the situation. You were able to see the good in the other person who was insulting you, who was being harsh, who was laying into you. That is an extreme level of piety and righteousness. And friends, hear me carefully when I say this. Every single one of us is capable of achieving those moments. Every single one of us is capable of achieving those moments where we can bite our tongue, where we cannot respond, where we can be insulted and don't return in kind, and rather instead see the good in the other. I'm not saying it's easy. It's a challenge. It might be the hardest challenge we can face, yet it's one that we are possible and able to overcome and achieve. And so I'm going to wish you good luck as we bring our class to an end. I will see you next week, God willing. You have 7 days. The way of the world is such that we will bump into another human being over these next 7 days that will give us the opportunity for us to put into practice these examples. I wish you good luck. If you've got good news for me next week at the beginning of the class, remind me and share with everybody and say, okay, here's what happened to me. That's our homework for the week. Deal? Okay, deal. Enjoy your homework. Good luck. I'm going to do it as well. I'm going to take my own words seriously, and we'll see where we are next Tuesday. I wish you well. Thank you very much, everybody. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful week, a successful week, becoming the patient people we would like to become.
Thank you.